Hi, I'm Anna Wilson. I'm the superintendent of Women's Rights National Historical Park, and I want to welcome you to our panel discussion. I just want to do a quick introduction of our moderator for today. So Judy Hart is the founding superintendent of Women's Rights National Historical Park and the first superintendent of Rosie the Riveter World War II National Historical Park. Before she was superintendent, Judy was the Boston Chief Ranger of Legislation for the Northeast region of the National Park Service. And in that role, she was able to focus on establishing a new national park for women's history in the national park system. Her dedication to sharing the stories centered around the beginning of the women's rights movement here in Seneca Falls was the catalyst that would establish and support the development of the park we have today. Along with Judy's dedication and hard work, a core group of people also supported the establishment of the Park Service's first idea park. Today we will hear from some of these supporters as they discuss their experiences in the early years of Women's Rights National Historical Park. And I would like to also introduce Emily McCarter, the president of the Friends of Women's Rights National Historical Park, who is co-sponsoring the event today.
Thank you very much. My name again is Emily McCarter, and I'm the president of the Friends of Women's Rights National Historical Park. We are really thrilled to bring this event and help to support this. We're very excited. Since Judy came in 2017 to the park to talk about the establishment of the park, and it was just fascinating. And we're really looking forward to this event today and happy to support it. If you are interested in learning more about the Friends, you can go to Women's Rights Friends, and there are ways to donate and learn about some of our projects. And thank you again for everyone who has come here today.
Thank you both for your work, or we wouldn't be here today. I trust you all know where you're sitting. And the site where the 1848 convention was held. It's a sacred space, in my opinion, easily the most important building for women's rights in the United States, or maybe the world, but certainly the United States, and you are sitting in it now. I do have a couple of preface comments. This is being filmed. If you don't want to be filmed, just put your hand up. I've had any number of requests from friends who couldn't travel this far. They really want to see this program. They're really interested, including the congressman who was the force behind the park I worked in California wants to see it. So, welcome. You're going to be a little famous. You all on your way to Hollywood. And I do want to introduce a couple of other people. We're very, very honored to have Mahinder Kinger, who is the editor-in-chief of the Cornell University Press. Could you attend to the microphone? For those of you who have not yet seen how gorgeous the book is, I teared when I opened up the box of my books. It's just beautiful and elegant and gracious and everything I wanted it to be. So, Mahinder?
Well, thank you very much, Judy. Mahinder Kinger, Cornell University Press. I'm just really honored to be part of this program, and I know Cornell University Press and Three Hills and Print was just really thrilled to have this book on our list and to be able to help sort of play a part in telling this really important story that has, national and international significance. And it's been a delight working with Judy. I did not bring this book in. A colleague of mine did, but I was there to bring the book across the finish line and work with Judy on the cover and on the copy and on trying to get the book out there. And we're really thrilled it's out in the world and really pleased that you're all here to learn more about the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahinder. And just because it means a lot to me, I want to introduce a couple of other people. There are, I believe, 4 people here from Prairie Village, Kansas, including me, including my best friend and partner, Bob Gramson, and Libby Powell-Berkebon. And Bob Berkebon, are you here? That's what I thought. Hard to recognize people after 40 years. Thank you for coming here from Prairie Village. And I might mention that Hans was in Germany 2 days ago, so thank you all for being here. Probably most of you know that in started, this building was a laundromat. Does everybody know that?
Yes.
And I was on the first trip out here in '78, and we stopped in front of this building with a whole entourage of very excited people, and I felt we were stopping here because there was room for our 5 cars to park in front of the laundromat. And we got out and looked around for the biggest building in town, and someone said, this laundromat is the Wesleyan Chapel. Oh, God. The Park Service, as you may know, is very particular about authentic historic structures. It was an enormous challenge to get the Park Service to create a park here. But I do want to quickly give you an understanding that this is because of the Park Service and the community, including these people up here now. This was not an outside job. This was not people beating down the doors because of their whatever interest. I was an employee of the Park Service. I worked the first 3 weeks. It was 2 women in the Park Service. I said, I want a new park for women's history. My counterpart in Washington said, yay, finally. She was sitting in Washington, surrounded by men in suits and ties. And she said, but if it's not already declared nationally significant, it's dead in the water. The Park Service isn't going to want this. There are 3 new parks then, 3 had to do with women. So you're going to hear in a minute who made that possible, and he's sitting next to Coline. And you have to tell that story, guys. For nomination. When he was 15. But everybody up here has had substantial involvement in getting us where we are now. So I do want to say, and I want to credit the men in the Park Service, because some people think only women could have made this park. And I understand that, I respect it, but believe me, the leadership of the National Park Service was 100% men in 1978, as were all the men on the Hill and in Congress. Only Congress can create a national park. They were all men, with foresight and courage, and they rolled over their staff, frankly, in more than a few cases. There were 3 different directors of the Park Service that pushed this park past the objections, and there were plenty of objections, like a laundromat? Are you kidding? Yeah, well, anyway, there were 3 directors who helped push this park through. And also I want to credit my 2 immediate bosses, Terry Savage, who's not here today, but when I told him I wanted to suggest a new park for women's history, he hadn't even arrived in town. He was driving to Boston from Denver. And I called him in his hotel. So I know you haven't started working yet, but I have to get an answer on this. I think we should have a new park for women's history. And God bless him, that could have killed this park right then, in the 3rd week. He memorably said, cool, now go find one. Which Peggy and I did. And my regional director, somebody got the pleasure of meeting Herb Cables, who was absolutely critical to developing this park. And 2 names of people who are no longer with us, but deserve all the credit in the world. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan was a power behind this park all the way through, and Congressman Frank Horton. So that's enough from me. We are going more or less in chronological order, and we're speaking from left to right. Proceed, Coline. And I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves, and if you're too modest, I will override you.
My name is Coline Jenkins, and I'm the great-granddaughter of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who is here. But what's important to note that she was 32 years old when she stood approximately here and read the Declaration of Sentiments. You can think of it as the Declaration of Independence adapted to a women's situation. So my family has been coming to this area, not that we lived here, but visiting for about 150 years. So I guess that's why you let me start. Well,
The beginning.
yeah, the beginning. So this is the mitochondrial DNA of 6 generations that have come here. And I think what's important is about women's rights. And I think our task today is to describe some story that was significant in this evolution of a national park. And I'd like to talk to you about my mother. This is my grandmother, who had a daughter, Rhoda, who was asked to be on a commission to define what is this park for women's rights. And I can guarantee you that in the 1970s, women's rights are as controversial as today. So she was on a panel that basically said, what we're going to do, we're going to cut off this park with a passage of the 19th Amendment. When women got the right to vote, great, we're done. But if you really look at the Declaration of Sentiments, the demand for elective franchise was only a demand for one of the rights. But there's a whole slew of other rights that had not been actualized. And so my mother said graphically, well, what do you do about Alice Paul, who worked actively as a suffragist? And then in 1920, when the 19th Amendment was passed, she foresaw we needed another amendment to the Constitution to guarantee equal rights, the Equal Rights Amendment. And she actually came back here to Seneca Falls to propose that amendment. So I think it's really important for all of us to think, what is this park? And I do believe that it is about women's rights, where it was declared certain rights here, but we're an evolving nation and an evolving world. So I think it's really important to keep that concept that this is not something that happened and frozen in the past, whether it's 4 days or the 19th Amendment. So I'd like to conclude by thanking Theodore Roosevelt. I don't call her Judy Hart anymore. I think a human that's created 2 national parks deserves something more exalted. So I call her the Theodore Roosevelt because she's created 2 parks. I'd like to thank her for her tenacity, her brilliance, everything. And I'd like to thank a million other acts, and particularly people in Seneca Falls that needed to keep the flame burning. It's a huge responsibility to have a national park in your backyard. So I'd like to thank everybody that contributed anything to making this a success, and that will continue to make this a significant national park as well as international park. And by the way, in closing, I walked out those doors, and I was a little bit of a Martian because I lived in Sweden 13 years. So there's this tall guy next to me with snowy white hair, pointing over to the mill, saying, my family worked in a mill. And who was that man? That I didn't know who he was, but Judy identified him as Senator Moynihan. So tribute to him, tribute to you. And another time when I walked out that door, there was a woman that was dressed very interestingly, and we were parallel walking. So I said, who are you? I'm not really that blunt. But, and she turned out to be the Minister of Health of Yemen. So this is an international park. And the discussions that come through Mecca, where we come and we meet, those are really significant. So thank you all.
So Judy's written a book about why there is a women's rights national historical park, and because we're sitting here today, there's this tendency, I think, to think, well, it was sort of necessary that A followed by B, followed by C, followed by D, and here we are at some level beyond that point, because we are here. But I think in reading Judy's book and being reminded of the past from reading the book in several drafts, it was how unlikely it is that we are here at Women's Rights National Historical Park, because in this narrative, as we go from A to B, it was it was much more likely that it was going to be A to not B, or not C, or not D. If the probability was on the other side of this event not being here. So I think we misweight for the fact that we are here how it is that those contingent events came together to put us here today. And I think that will be some of the fun of this panel, which is learning about some of those things that today seem, well, of course, A, had followed immediacy, but how, in retrospect, it was actually the other side of it, there not being a park here, that was at many points in that process much more likely. And it's therefore not necessarily the case that we hear today. It's really much more likely that we will be sitting here in a laundromat and hearing the whir of the dryers in the background. So.
And I have to comment, as I will for anybody who's being unduly modest. Hans, as a 15-year-old junior in high school, volunteered to work with the Stanton Foundation, which was trying to raise money to preserve the Stanton House. And he volunteered to write the nomination to create a National Historic District here. Now, I'm sure you all remember, I just said that Peggy from Washington said this idea is dead in the water unless the Park Service has already decreed it to be nationally significant. So Hans, at 15, wrote the application. New York State approved it, Park Service approved it, as was typical over and over and over again when I was reading the records. There was like 2 paragraphs on the structures, 3 pages of the story. So, but New York State reacted to the story as did the Park Service and used the laundromat as a nationally significant structure. And that was point B. First it was Terry Savage. If Hans had not written that and they had not approved it, we would not be sitting here today.
Okay, I guess I'm up. My name is August Sinicropi. I was born and raised 4 blocks away from here. Went away to college, came home, started an optometric practice, got drafted 2 months after I started practicing, went into the Army and served a couple of years during the Vietnam War, and then came back home. And I love this place, I love this community, and I was concerned about how we could keep it vibrant and moving ahead. And it was very obvious to me that we had some significant historical structures within the community that were, again, as everyone said, being overlooked. So bear with me, I tried to put a chronology together, and I'll try to get through it as quick as I can because it's amazing. I believe in God. I believe there are things that we just don't understand, and it's amazing the serendipity that occurred in the years of starting really the mind of 1997, but through, in the words of Frank Sinatra, 1978 was a very good year. And so I'm going to try to run through that without any further ado. In 1977, we started the Seneca Falls Revitalization Committee, and it was an arm of the Seneca County Chamber of Commerce at that time. And the Revitalization Committee came up with a 4-phase program that we thought could help the community and also help the movement. The first phase was pretty generic. We were going to replace sidewalks in the Central Business District with a HUD grant that was received. And the second phase was we wanted to develop the canal front as a recreational attraction focused on the women's rights movement. The canal promenade would include statues of the most famous early leaders of the movement, including Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Lucretia Mott, Jane Hunt, Mary Ann McClintock, and so forth. The third stage was another generic. We wanted to develop more parking areas that would be required for the increased visitation. The fourth phase is what we're here about today. And the wording of the fourth phase was, we wanted to relocate the National Women's Hall of Fame from Eisenhower College to Fall Street and secure state and federal protection for the Elizabeth Cady Stanton home and the Wesleyan Chapel. And from that point on, it just got nuts. That was 1981. Now, on 2/1/78, I presented the 4-page revitalization program to the Seneca Falls Historical Society annual dinner. And there were 300 people there who had, great interest in Seneca Falls and what it meant. And that generated buzz within the community, I think, and that was February. In June of '78, I attended a conference on the future of the Finger Lakes in Canandaigua and learned that there was a New York Urban Cultural Park program for which the Seneca Falls Revitalization Program was actually prototypical. And in August of '78, several of us went to Albany to meet with the UCP officials here, the Cultural Park people. And there were 3 of us actually, myself and Corinne Gunsel, who was a true angel for this area, and for the park. He was an Eisenhower professor, and Tony Petrocchi, who was at that time the chair of our recreation commission in town. So that was August. In September, 2 New York State Urban Cultural Park Program officials, Charlie Brule and Rand Anderson, visited Seneca Falls at the request of the Revitalization Committee to review the eligibility for the Urban Cultural Park Program. And after formal presentation and a tour of the village, they returned to Albany in strong support of the community's inclusion in the Urban Cultural Park Program. That was September. Later in September, Revitalization Committee members initiated the formation of the Elizabeth Cady Stanton Foundation with the great help, as Judy has mentioned. And several of us were members on that first board. Later in September of '78, New York State Transportation Department, Nancy Dubner, sponsored a luncheon at the Seneca Falls Holiday Inn for numerous proponents in the creation of a national monument to the women's rights movement in Seneca Falls. Representation of the Revitalization Committee presented their ideas and to form the Elizabeth Cady Stanton Foundation, which was very well received. That was September of '78. In December of '78, here they are. The National Park Service officials, Judy Hart and Sherry H. Bird, visit Rochester and Seneca Falls, researching sites for the potential for new parks. After their visit to Seneca Falls, they were overwhelmed by the significantly more organized and progressive activities towards the creation of a women's rights historical park than they were greeted in Seneca Falls. The Revitalization Committee hosted a reception and presented a slide critique. Everyone saw my slides there coming in so many different meetings. Revitalization presented a slide of the 4-phase revitalization program and the progress that had been made with the creation of the Elizabeth Cady Stanton Foundation and the UCP process, Urban Cultural Park process. In January of '79, about a year through this process, UCP officials came to Seneca Falls to further evaluate the village's potential as a pilot community. And that is Charlie Brule and Rand Anderson. And they were second to none in terms of governmental support for the park. And then December of '78, National Park Service officials Sherry Cageberg and Judy Hart visit Rochester and Seneca Falls, researching sites for potential new national parks. And that conflux of governmental activity is ultimately what brought us together here. There was one particular memory, and I'll close with that rings, will forever ring in my brain. It was time that I realized we were going to be a national park, Judy arranged a boat trip, and I had the boat, and she brought Richard Stanton and a couple other Park Service people, and we took a cruise up Hugo Lake through the Seneca River, and we were at the locks here at the end of Van Cleef Lake. And we were talking, I was sort of driving the boat, and Director Stanton was standing next to me, and Judy and a couple other, I don't know if Terry Savage was there at that time or not, but they were all with us. And as the locks opened up, the second locks, and Director Stanton saw the Van Cleef Lake, but then the park structure, the architecture along the lake, and the potential where the Stanton House was, he looked at me and said, "Great idea for a park." And it was that moment that I knew everything was going to be okay. And I could go on and on about the people who were involved in all of this, but it's a short subject. But what I want to finish with is this is the woman. This is the person who maneuvered both the state government and the federal government and the village government to make this thing happen. So thank you, Judy. I celebrate you.
Before you start, again, I had to interrupt with some undue modesty. I don't know how intentional it was, but when Augie put together his 4-stage plan, I'm sure you remember it began with, we're going to fix the sidewalks and we're going to change the streetlights. Now, who could possibly object to that? Augie brought in the business community, translate the men in Seneca Falls, brought them in immediately to his program, so that when the national park arrived, and there could have been some significant backlash, I certainly felt it in the Park Service. I didn't feel it here, because Augie already collected those people to support this effort, and that was brilliant. And Augie's famous for one other thing, heavy snackers. I brought everybody I could possibly persuade out to Seneca Falls to show them how wonderful it was. Park Service, Congress, state, whoever, I'd invite them out here. And the end of the day would always be, we'll call it cocktail party, but Augie always called it heavy snackers. And that plus that boat ride, these are the ways you bring the heart of somebody into this kind of a project. This is how you do it. Thank you, Augie.
One thing I had to say, this guy next to me, Bert, and the whole other catalog, they're the force that drew this movement. Their commitment to the community, their brilliance in presenting and the issues we were trying to do. So there you go, Bert. I had to get that in there.
I should leave it at that. Hi, I'm Bert Fortner, and we were lucky enough, my partner and I, in the whole duck catalog, to be hired by the village to help advance the agricultural part. And we were centered, we were in Ithaca, and it was easy to get up here and fun. And we came up as much as we could. I think the reason they hired us was the name. I mean, how could you not hire someone from the whole duck catalog to work in Seneca Falls? I mean, it's a natural. So we did, we, as they say, we ate a terrible word with the agricultural park, but we basically lived in Seneca Falls, and we got to know the people here, and I wouldn't give that up for anything. It was a wonderful experience. We did design work, we did architectural work, we worked on one of the major things was trying to get the boundaries of the agricultural park and the national park to be similar. And that took some hot wiring. But one of the most surprising things was really the first couple of visits here were in the winter. And get into the role of what we were going to be doing. And we advertised in the paper that on a certain Saturday, Phil and I would be giving a tour of Van Cleef Lake. Now, Van Cleef Lake is part of the barge canal system, and in the winter, the water goes away. We thought maybe 3 people would come. We had probably 40 or 50. So we had to run up to the police department and borrow a horn. And we let them through probably the most dangerous bit of water and ice and traps that anybody, and we survived and everyone survived. Otherwise I wouldn't be here to say this. But, so the rest of the time was working intimately with people in Seneca Falls. And that was a joy. I mean, there were some really odd times, because it was the local, there was the National Park, the Agricultural Park, and the Historic District that performed, obviously to keep and preserve and further the history of the area. One day, I had a man come to the office. Oh, by the way, our office was we shared the office with the septic, the trash machine. So they could get rid of us whenever they wanted. But one of the most interesting things was this man was obviously pretty upset. And he said, I don't care. I don't care if I'm in the historic district. I couldn't give up. You're not going to take my toilets. I was, luckily I had presence of mind to say, we're not going to take your toilets. Why would we take your toilets? We like your toilets. No, we're here to help and explain and help you with projects you want to do, help you find materials, help you find builders, help you get a toilet from the 1800s if you want. And we talked for about an hour, and he went away happy. And I think that was part of what everybody was doing, was just working with people who liked the ideas and didn't like the ideas, and trying to make the idea of what this could be as beautiful to them as it is to all of us. And I hope we were able to accomplish that. Most of it when I do though is quack, so I'm going to quack. And with that, I will pass it to Judy.
You're being a little modest again. Bert and Phil, but especially Bert, was on the front line of the people in the community who, as he just told you, were afraid that this whole preservation effort was going to take their toilets away. He was on the front line dealing with a lot of people. Some of them loved what he was doing, but a lot of them didn't. And he was also on the front line of endless meetings, which even I, as a federal bureaucrat, found taxing. How we could possibly coordinate the funding and the timing and the planning of the state UCP and the federal park. And there were endless meetings where we, be collapsed on the table by the time it was over. But Bert was always there, helping us figure out how to work it, how to blend them, as was Augie. But Bert was the one sitting there, excuse me, on the front line. Thank you, Bert.
I think it helped to have been a duck because it all rolls right off your back. Yeah, you're good. I'm Judy Wellman, and I was the first historian of the park. Thanks to Judy. Judy is really the catalyst, as people have said, for all of this. It would not have happened without you. Thank you. I first came from the University of Virginia to teach at the State University of New York at Oswego in 1972, and it was sort of the beginning of the women's movement and the high kind of wave of the civil rights movement. So I'm thinking, as one of those radical students, how can I take a real job and not sell out? I thought, okay, I will teach about African American history and Native history and women's history. So I came with like an 8-page syllabus to SUNY Oswego, and I said, I want to teach this class. Actually, I did an interview with Virginia Military Institute first. I handed it to them and they said, oh, that's going to be a short course, isn't it? You don't have one. I said, okay, that's exactly why we need to talk about this, because you don't really understand. So that first year I had one of the first women's history classes in the country, and we read the Declaration of Sentiments, and if you have not read it, reread it. It is really, really good. If you read the Declaration of Independence, it's actually now incredibly boring. If you read the Declaration of Sentiments, you will say, oh my gosh, we're still dealing with this. Jobs, religion, family, the law, church, morals, respect. It really speaks to us, and it spoke to those students and to me. So we decided we would come to Seneca Falls, it's 43 miles from Oswego, and we would see what's here. So we all got in our cars, no money for buses or anything, we just all kind of carpooled. And we came and we looked at the Wesleyan Chapel, and it was a laundromat. We thought, how appropriate, that's women's work. I later came, some of you remember Heather Hyde came up from the Park Service and I met her here, and as a joke I brought my laundry and did it while we were having this meeting. And then we went to the Stanton house, and a lot of you probably remember that it was that kind of sea green shingles, really awful. And we thought, it doesn't look like people really understand how important this place was, and it certainly isn't reflected in the buildings that the built environment. And I was just finishing a dissertation that was dealing with abolitionism and other reforms in local communities in New York State. And so I was kind of thinking, oh, what can I do next? And I said, this is what I want to do next. Because we looked at the 100 signatures on that declaration, and we recognized, I did, I'm not sure the students did, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Frederick Douglass, and Lucretia Mott. And that was it. And there were 97 other people, 68 women, 32 men. I said, who the heck are these people? We don't know anything about them. And this was kind of the emergence of social history. So I thought, okay, I'll do stuff like census work and assessment records and all this local material. I did, and I have thousands of pieces of information on all the people we could find. We found all but 12 of them, and they were all women, so they probably got married, and they might as well have died in terms of the historical record. And so I began working on this book, and it was about 1978. I remember coming down and seeing Judy Hart and Sherry Berg. That's when I met Hans and a whole lot of the rest of you at that time, people sitting here and people who are not. Two of the people who are not, I can just, they're here, they're echoing. Some of you remember Mary Curdy sitting in front of this building with a card table for such a long time. And Corinne Gutzel, who was working with Hans and all the rest of us at that time. And sorry they're not here to be with us, but I think their spirits still continue to infuse us. Another person who was important in those early years was Marie Rust. And she was very supportive from the Park Service as well, which was really nice. And then this was about the time Judy came and organized a trip to Lowell, Massachusetts, where they were just starting a new park. We were all excited, and I remember you color-coded our house and classes. But it was so energizing, and this was the time that Rutgers University had discovered some Elizabeth Cady Stanton papers that had been kept by her son Theodore. No one had realized was there. Corinne and I went down and got all excited about that, and then we went and did some work with the new Stanton Anthony papers in Amherst, Massachusetts, which was working on an NEH grant that's resulted in a huge and wonderful collection that sustains us all today. So there was so much energy in what you were doing at that time. And then Ellen Alda is another person that came for the dedication. I think there were 5,000 people in the streets out here. That was just a really exciting day. I also want to give credit to Fran Carasillo, who I think you must have worked with a lot, and who is still really committed and a wonderful person to work with and to keep going with. He helped organize the Elizabeth Cady Stanton Foundation, which was able to take ownership of the Stanton House with help from an insurance policy, a life insurance policy that someone had donated because their mom had died. It's one of those things you just feel, as you were saying, Ani, that the stars were aligned and it's bigger than any of us, and you just can't believe that it's really, okay, this is what we need, and here it is. It's just quite amazing. And then the Stanton Foundation became a major supporter of the park, and they would hold a lot of programs, including, remember one we had with Audrey Shenandoah. We would come annually and celebrate the Stanton's birthday. And so really early on, we were beginning to work with Haudenosaunee people as well as African American people. And they would also organize for convention days marches from the Stanton House here. And I remember one, I had just adopted a tiny, beautiful little baby girl from India. And the McClintock family is listed in the 1850 census as having a couple of people of color in their household. One of them was a little girl. So I dressed up like Mary Ann McClintock, and I took my little girl baby, and we did a march, and it was wonderful to be here. And we began to reach out to people like, I remember Dot Wilsey from Peterborough and the Garrett Smith home came here one year, and we found out they were organizing programs that were history-based to help victims of domestic violence. So Corinne and I went out there and said, oh, we gotta meet this woman. And I think that whole movement epitomized one of the reasons we're doing this, which isn't because the past is past. It's not past, it's here. And we were working as well as we could to listen to the people of the past and hear what they had to say. And just in that vein, I started this book in 1972. I started looking at this topic. This book was not published for 32 years until 2004. It's called The Road to Seneca Falls, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and the Women's Rights Convention. And one reason was I was collecting all this material, what social historians were doing in that period, looking at a lot of statistical stuff. And I was giving all kinds of papers and going everywhere and doing everything. And then we talked to Judy was kind of aware of that, which is why I ended up being here. And we did a lot of work to get shared everything. And so I had a sabbatical in 1992, and I said, oh, I'll just put together all these papers I've done, it'll be fine. And it wasn't working. It just wasn't working. And I heard this voice, and it was Elizabeth McClintock. And she was saying, you know, you just can't do it this way. We'll help you, but you have to tell our story in our words. And I said, oh, I started all over and did a complete revision of everything. And that's why it took 32 years to do it. Because I learned I need to listen to these voices of people in the past because they do have something to tell us. And they're asking us to carry it on. And I think that's the challenge I continue to feel, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
Well, I think we can do it.
Well, this one works, right?
This one works.
Oh,
Okay. Well, I came by happenstance. My husband was in the construction business when the federal highway was coming through. It was in Waterloo. We were supposed to live in Geneva. Anyway, make a long story short, we ended up in Seneca Falls and we bought a house. And my kids went to school here. When I got here and I saw the laundromat, and then I saw a New York State sign that said this was the home of the first women's rights convention was held in 1848. And then Mary Curry would come out every July 17th and 18th, the dates, and see that. It just irked me. That's all I can say, that there was this laundromat behind it. This was a very significant piece of history that we're moving in. And I thought, oh dear, we have to do something. But anyway, my life took a turn with Becky Holden making sure that I became a member of the board of directors for the National Women's Hall of Fame. And that was because I had been president of this school board and involved in the community. So I did. So again, we take a little leap. And it comes to, they get a commission, they get this started, and we're starting to have meetings. Okay? And these are 2-day meetings. Rhoda used to come, her mother. We had a whole group of people there. So anyway, they decided that there had to be a representative of the hall, which I had been president, so I came on this commission. Basically, we met and we were supposed to write resolutions. Well, they didn't give you an awful lot of time. This was a 2 to 3 day meeting. We would meet for breakfast, a bunch of us, and we would write those resolutions so we could get them through. So anyway, to make this is a very involved story how I got involved. And anyway, we're on the commission. We're trying to get this part to go through. And a woman by the name of Dorothy Duke was made the head of the commission. And she did not want the park. So anyway, for some reason, of all of us that were on the commission, she felt that she could talk to me. In the meantime, my husband had some illnesses. We were going to finally be able to take a trip with the family, which is a husband and 3 sons that are young, okay? We're talking high school kids, possibly not. And the park was very kind because we wanted to camp in parks, which they got me reservations. Okay, these are not the commission, this is people in the park that made these reservations way ahead of time. So Dorothy realizes that I'm going to be in the Tetons. She has a summer place there. And she has decided that we should go to dinner. The only good thing about the 3 sons being in high school and younger could go on, she had set up a whitewater rafting trip for the boys, which was good. But we had to go to dinner. In the meantime, we're at the Tetons, Jenny Lake, and there's a ranger that comes knocking on the tent to give us information from Dorothy Duke about what we're supposed to do, about the dinner and all of this. So that's my story of how I got involved. I was named to be, I came through the National Women's Hall of Fame, and it was Becky Holden that got me involved. So that was how I ended up. They had to have a representative from the National Women's Hall of Fame, and I was the representative on the commission. So that's my complicated story of my trip with Dorothy Duke, who didn't want the park, but we finally got it going. So it was a very interesting time, and a very interesting time to move to Seneca Falls.
And I'm a little modest now. With care, I will dip into some politics. What she's talking about is Dorothy Duke very proudly announced to me that she was the best friend of the right-hand man of Secretary James Watt. And some of you may remember him. He announced that he was going to get rid of parks that we couldn't afford, weren't nationally significant, and I figured, you know, we've got nobody on the ground and money and nothing in Seneca Falls, we've got a target on our back. That's who Marilyn was the liaison with. It was James Watt's running buddy. And it was no small endeavor, and she was also my liaison whenever anything came up for tension in the community. Marilyn would fix it. Carol.
My name is Carol Ritter Wright. I am looking across the panel here. I am clearly the oldest Seneca Falls native up here. I was born in a hospital here that doesn't even exist anymore. I went through 12 years of public school in Seneca Falls in the 1940s and 50s. And there was one paragraph in one social studies book that mentioned Seneca Falls, New York as the place where a convention for women's rights had happened in 1848. That was it. That was it. I spent several years here raising children. My husband and I bought a house on East Bayard Street in 1963, a fairly short walk around the corner and down the block from the Elizabeth Cady Stanton house. And when my kids were little, I would take them in the stroller to go over to the Stanton house. There was a historical marker in front of the house. It was a private residence. It certainly didn't look historical. It looked like a house. Out here on this corner, there was a historical marker that was placed in 1948. I remember the 1948 convention celebration, the centennial, only because my brother, I was 6 at the time, my brother was in the high school band and he had to come into town to play in the parade. I don't think we went to the parade. We lived on a farm outside of town. You can fast forward quite a long ways, but through that long ways, I became a newspaper reporter, and I covered this area, the central and eastern Finger Lakes, or the western Finger Lakes, the Seneca County, Yates County, Ontario County, this whole area for a long, long time for the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. And I never wrote a book. I wrote miles and miles and miles of copy about everything that was happening in these communities. And of course, part of it was the fact that a women's rights national historical park was in the works. It took forever to get to that point. I can tell you that this community as a village was incorporated in 1831. In the 1980s, the first woman ever to be elected to the village board was elected. Since then, that's more than 100 years, folks. And there had never been a woman on the County Board of Supervisors in that length of time. Never. The consciousness of women's rights in this community was there, on the ground. It took a very, very long time for it to be raised up. It still isn't anywhere near it should be, but it's getting there. I was divorced in 1975. I had to go through hell to get a credit card in my own name, despite the fact that I had a job, I had a career, I had been working at that point for decades. I still had to go through an awful lot to just get a credit card in my own name. So yes, Colleen, you're right. The women's rights movement in the 70s was still just struggling along, believe me. In the work up to the National Park, we got to know Judy. I was a member of the Seneca Falls Press Corps, as we called ourselves. There were several reporters covering Seneca Falls because this whole area has history that people had not paid any attention to as a huge, huge draw for anybody that didn't live here. A few miles away from here, the Mormon Church was founded in a log cabin. Waterloo was recognized, Waterloo is just up the road, you can walk there. Recognized in 1966 as the community where Memorial Day was founded. Something that affects more than half the percent of the population of this planet happened here. Who paid any attention? Practically nobody. It really, really annoyed me. It annoyed my colleague Greg here, who was also in the press corps at the time. Marty, another one. it annoyed us that nobody seemed to be really paying attention. So we did our best to spread the word with whatever formats that we happened to have at the time. We got to know Judy when she first came to town, and we liked her immediately. She was on Cracker Jack. She was a smart cookie who had the tact that was necessary to deal with people who had no interest at all in what we were trying to get done. Absolutely none. And, you know, they figured the best thing to do is get another big manufacturer in town. That's what we need, by gosh, we need an industry. We had a lot of them. That wasn't, nobody seemed to understand that tourism is an industry that's clean, it produces wonderful profits for all of the local businesses around. And besides, we have something here to be proud of. Well, if it was the Football Hall of Fame, I can tell you right now, there would have been 1 million people here every day for the past however many years that place has been open. The National Women's Hall of Fame and the Women's Rights National Historical Park have always had to struggle to keep themselves visible, alive, and functional, simply because it's only 52% of the population that's involved. This is a big problem. So as the park was being progressed, my daughter, my late daughter, Ann Ritter, who was a college student at the time, became the first ranger appointed for the National Women's Hall of Fame, or for the National Women's Rights National Historical Park. Sorry. A lot of people think those are two of the same thing, and they aren't. They're not even related, but they're both important. But the Women's Rights National Historical Park, my daughter Ann became the first ranger, and we were so thrilled. She was thrilled to death. She'd known the Stanton House her whole life. She'd gone over there with her friends to stand and gawk at the house and recognize what it probably meant. And she had been downtown, of course, and had seen this marker out here a million times, and she had me for a mother, for goodness sake. She obviously wasn't going to just let this all pass by. I gotta tell you, it's wonderful to see what has happened, but there's a lot more that needs to happen. There's a lot more that needs to be done. There's a lot of enthusiasm and energy that needs to be injected into this whole community to keep the national park as alive and as vital as it deserves to be. The people who work at the park, the people who support it, there need to be a whole lot more of them. This needs to be a much more important thing in people's minds than it really is now. I'm hoping that'll happen before I die of old age. I'm getting there, but it ain't going to happen soon. I think it would be wonderful to have this. I'd like to know how many, exactly, for this matter. I'd like to know how many of the local officials have ever actually been in this building since it was a laundromat, with, by the way, bachelor apartments upstairs. They were advertised as bachelor apartments. And before that, this was the Ford garage. They sold cars right here. I'd like to know how many of them have actually ever been in this building, or if they have, if they've been here in the past couple of years, maybe, to see these wonderful things. I doubt it, frankly. I suspect there are some who have never set foot in this place, have never been in the visitor center over there, have never read the Declaration of Sentiments. That's really sick, and I hope it improves.
I think that that was Ann Kramer that was elected the first one, right? Landslide Ann Kramer, right? She, by one vote. One vote. I'm Brett Cotterill. I had to follow Carol Ritter. Wow. Compared to everybody on this stage, this is how much I had to do with the park. That much, nothing. Well, a little bit. Judy Hart and I used to sit on the porch of the Stanton House every July and do a radio broadcast, sitting on the porch. We were going to do that this weekend, but the weather didn't want to cooperate. But Judy, you made the park happen. You made this book happen. Like your introduction in the book says, you made it happen. Congratulations, Judy. All right, you would think I would know how to work every day, talking on the radio. But Judy, you made it happen. I moved to Seneca Falls after graduating from Syracuse University. I lived right across the street here on State Street in an apartment, and I used to do my laundry here. Doug Howard and I would come in here. Doug was on the radio as well. He's in the book. We would do our laundry here. We would come in the back door where the cars were. We'd do our laundry. Go back across the street to the radio station. I did love reading the book, Judy. I loved all the names in the book. Some people, of course, I know and remember. Some I'd forgotten about. Bert Fortner and the whole duck catalog. Holy mackerel, I got to shake Bert's hand this morning out on the street. But names like George Sewin and how important he was to the park. Sinicropi, of course. Congressman Horton, Senator Moynihan. Is a story that the senator used to say that it was a young boy climbed through the window in 1848 to unlock the doors so the Women's Rights Convention could take place. I never knew if he was making that up, or is that true? True story. But all the names in the book, Anne and Ray, from the design competition, it brought back a lot of memories. Judy, you and I sitting on the porch talking. It was a great time. My favorite part of the book, and I'm just going to read it real quick, is page 95. I had to read it, but I'll just tell you what it says. I'll summarize it. George Sewin, on the radio station, Susan's out there, he said, "Are you done working today?" And I said, "Yes." "Get across the street and help them paint and finish what was the visitor center. It's an art center now." And so I went across the street and I painted the stairs going up, the walls and the stairs going up to Judy's office. That's in the book. Judy, I'm glad you put that in there about painting the walls. And we had to get it done because they had to hang up the exhibits for the opening the next day. So that's my favorite part of the book. Well, the whole book is great, but that's page 95, by the way. And, but just one last thing. Judy, I got one slight suggestion. When the paperback comes out, fall off the stage. When the paperback comes out, could you try and get this photo in there? This is a photo of Judy and I doing a radio podcast. Marty, I think you took that photo. Right? Keep that in the paperback edition. Congratulations.
Well, we have the person here who can make that happen.
I'm Marty Toombs. I was the daily newspaper reporter in Seneca Falls for 15 years. I did my share of 4-hour village board meetings, none of which I'll remember at this point, but I think I knew in other parts of the press corps, we knew that when we were covering park stuff, it really mattered, because that was the future. It was what was going to kind of cement Seneca Falls where it needed to be. Sitting here today listening to people talk, I think we should change the name of the park. It should be the Women's Rights National Park, because we're interested in the history, but there is more to it than that. The one thing is covering the park, it was, reading the book, it all came back to me, different events, and how this happened, and then that happened. You look back now and you say, hey, this is great visitor center, this place is open, we've got park staff running around. We were on the verge of that not happening so many times. And that's what the book really gets into. And I think that everyone who cares about the park, or cares about women's rights, or who cares about Seneca Falls, would find the book to be interesting. There were a couple of things that got me a little depressed, and I'll mention this in passing and don't want to make a big deal. One is the number of people listed and described in the book who aren't with us anymore. The other one, frankly, Carol mentioned the press corps. When I came here in 1981, there were 4 daily newspaper reporters with offices in Seneca Falls. 4 of us. They're all gone. The radio station is gone. The weekly newspaper is gone. And things have changed, not for the better in some cases. And I don't know how we ever get that back. I know the 80s with Carol and Dave and Jack Rosenberry and I, especially the first couple of years, Carol had a big birthday party, and she had champagne left over. So after a county board meeting, 4 of us went to her house, and we're playing euchre, And we ended up having to throw in the cards several times because we forgot what was Trump. So, but the four of us competed like crazy, and we loved to scoop each other. But we were good friends. I scooped the rest of them on my wedding day, which is probably one of the greater pride things I got going back. But I was scooping good reporters, and it's sad that what has happened in the last 20 years to journalism, and to newspapers, and to radio stations, that what's happened. And if we started something like this now, who would cover it? Don't know. And I think we haven't mentioned Howard Van Kirk today.
Yes.
Howard's one of those who's no longer with us. His wife and his daughter aren't there. And Howard was always a very big supporter of everything that was Seneca Falls, and that includes the park. So that's him. Howard hired me for my first weekly newspaper job when I was in junior high school.
I wanted to exert executive privilege and tell you the last two stories quickly, because I think they are not known in Seneca Falls, and they are two of the times when the park could have just gone down the tubes and was saved by two individuals, really. The first, well, I guess in chronological order, the first one was Barry Bradshaw, who was general counsel for Goulds Pumps. Can you all hear? General counsel for Goulds Pumps, and also the elected deputy mayor. And the legislation, again, Congress has to create a part. Legislation sailed through the House. We could not get a Senate hearing, and I'm sure it was Daniel Moynihan who took care of that. We had one scheduled for September 8th. And Barry Bradshaw, for one thing, collected about a dozen people who lived in Seneca Falls and paid their way to go to Washington, so he could dramatically say, see, the community supports this. You know, they're all sitting behind me, including Bert. I know Bert was there. Were you there? Which was very generous of Goulds. But also, the senator who was manning the hearing was asking the strangest questions. His first question was, oh, you want to do the Women's Rights Park. Where are you going to put the Men's National Park? But the really dangerous part, aside from his quirkiness, was suggesting that it was just a jobs employment program. And this is, again, thanks to Augie. Barry Bradshaw had, as required, written a few pages of testimony and got reviewed by everybody in the world so that he could speak. But he, who was a big man, he's no longer with us, rather dramatically picked up his testimony and put it down and said, Senator, let me tell you the real story. And a man who traveled the world negotiating leases for oil pumps, for Goulds Pumps, rolled over that senator. It was a beautiful thing to watch. He answered every question, every objection, and he emphasized that the ECP program was the jobs program, the employment, the recreation program, not the National Park Service. And Senator Saunders, who was leading it, threatened to not let it out of his committee, which meant it was Gaza. Barry Bradshaw turned that on its head. And it was one of those, as Hans said, you know, we wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for that. The other one I want to give credit for when the park was created, again, we had nothing here. George Soon graciously gave me his office in the radio station, which is partly how I got to know all the wonderful reporters who were my best friends when he was here. And I got to know the manager, Doug Atkins, who was sorry he couldn't be here this week. So there was a lot of communication between me and Doug and George Soon. And I begged the General Services Administration to come out here and find us an office. I didn't have any place to sit except in George's office. And I wanted to hire staff, and I wanted to do this big thing with Alan Holden. So they came out, two men came out from Manhattan, and they said, well, we found a used car sales operation down on 414 that would be perfect for you. And I said, I don't think so. So I went over to George Simmons' office to whine and complain, frankly. He was a friend of then. And I told him what they'd said. And the other thing was, in those days, GSA, if they had been willing to sign a lease, they were going to pay for it. With a budget of $60,000, that was a big deal. So I told George about it, and he listened. Got a little fidgety, and he said, I'm going to make a visitor center. And he did. He knew that the furniture store that was at 116 Fall Street, the owner wanted to retire, and he owned the furniture store owner, owned the building. George opened the building. We had GSA come back out. They said, oh, this isn't even close to our standards. You gotta have 2 stairways, one's gotta be firewall, this and this and this and this. We're not even gonna have a gentleman's agreement with you. If you wanna do this, fine. Call us when you're finished and we'll come out and tell you if you like it. George Stone, bless him, just jumped into the deep water and made a beautiful visitor center and offices for us at 116 Fall Street. And I don't know how I could have started the park without it. That was another time that would have delayed things for years, if not forever. So thank you to George and Susan. And although we're running a little late, but I'm perfectly willing, if you all are, to take a few questions and answers. Emma?
If anyone has questions, please raise your hand. I'll hand you the microphone.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Tedeschi, and a woman named Nan Johnson brought me down here. This was before the Friends even started. But anyway, I have 2 questions. One, what was Jimmy Carter's role in this, if he had any at all? And the other thing is, where are we going with our dear Louise Slaughter's Women's History Trail?
Well, I'd be happy to answer the first one. I'm not sure who would answer the second one. Sorry. I'm sorry, your first question was Carter. I could have given him even more credit. Those first years, from when I suggested the idea in 78 to 1980, which was, according to everybody in Washington, lightning speed for getting legislation through. His particular personal role was the last piece of legislation he signed before he left office, December 28th, 1980. But that's a simple version because the Park Service works very closely with Congress. And more than you might imagine, or maybe you do, the philosophies and prejudices and preferences of the President of the United States, that is where it trickles down. That works. Doesn't work with money, but it works with policy. Jimmy Carter was supportive of parks. He wanted them expanded, increased. That influenced the members in Congress who, for that brief period, were in the same frame of mind. And the Park Service could be in the same frame of mind. I even got to go to the Hill and lobby, God forbid, because there was such a supportive philosophy, I'll say, that did trickle down from Jimmy Carter. So I give him great credit, plus signing the legislation.
Louise Slaughter's there.
Hi, Marilyn. Just quickly about the trail. It was Hillary Clinton in the Senate too, and Louise Slaughter, who really, and it did go through legislation. It did pass, but it never got funded.
Right.
One of a group called the National Collaborative of Women's History Sites, which Coline's been really supportive of for many years, took up the challenge and put together all the information we had, which was a lot, and started a National Votes for Women Trail, which is now on their website with, I think, 2,300 sites. It's been a crowd-based effort all across the country, and that group organized a national effort with coordinators in every state, and partly through Coline, I think, planning the idea, the Pommery Foundation took it on, and in 2017, they did 30-some sites in New York State to commemorate New York State's approval, and in 2020, they did, in New York State, another 30-some sites. And there, I think the 2021 has like 212 sites across the country, and there are dedications still going on, and it's not just European American women, but also African American, Native American, Latino women. It's a wonderful, amazing project, and we're proud to say that New York State has more Pomeroy markers for suffrage than any other state in the Union.
It's a good time to circle back to something that you both mentioned about having markers, roadside markers, and it's actually somebody out of Syracuse, William Pomeroy Foundation, he's personally interested in civic engagement. And so that's his passion, is to fund approximately $1,000 a marker, and he stamps the date on his markers. Thus, he joins the 1930 Department of Education in New York State, putting markers up. So it's a great way to promote local history and make sure that other people promote it and expand it.
Any other questions?
First of all, thanks to all of you for your contribution to this extraordinary facility and this story, Judy. But I'm curious, after all this work and after this benchmark watershed moment, how do you extend this initiative? I mean, clearly we have a lot of work to do regarding women's rights today, and how can this be enhanced to teach the next generations about what's possible?
I love that question from Prairie Village, Kansas. Thank you, Bob. I can say things that no one who is employed by the Park Service can say. And I don't work there anymore, so they can't fire me. I'm glad you came back on it. Yes, there are ways to support the national park. You can connect with the elected officials at the state and federal level. And this is not something that Anna and I have ever talked about or ever would talk about. I can say it now, yes, you can connect with the elected officials and say, you think this place is wonderful and it needs help. Translate funding. The Friends group is Emily. Emily is representing the Friends group today and is the president. And part of their role is to support the development of the park, including perhaps fundraising, which is a huge need. If you've been walking around town, here and there, I hate to say it, but you can see a spot or two that needs painting. Raising funds would be an enormous help. And one of the things that I always faced when I was here, although there were 5 industries, including Google's, but 4 that went out of business while I was here. College went out of business while I was here. There were not the resources in Seneca Falls to raise substantial amounts of money. And that's a huge problem. If this park was in Rochester, someplace, some city where there were several large corporations, you go to the corporations and the companies and you say, wouldn't you like to support your national park? That's hard here. That's really hard. And the economy has shrunk, frankly, even more since I was here. You can promote it, you can talk about it to your friends, you can share the information that you saw and heard today. It is being filmed, thank you to the Dupreys at Waterloo. It's being filmed, it'll be posted on YouTube. And I will get the link from them, and I will give the link to Anna, so that you can spread the word. You can share this program to any place in the world you want to. And spreading the word is the first step in making friends, which is the next step after that, is getting support. So thank you for the question. There's lots you can do.
I just add something quickly. There are 3 other groups that are national groups that are beginning to work together and with the Park Service, including on the Clara Martin site, which was the first women's rights site in the Park Service and was just being completely neglected. And that is the National Collaborative of Women's History Sites, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which has a Where Women Made History page and is very interested in women's history sites, and the National Parks and Conservation Association, which also has a major initiative in women's history sites. And we're trying to dialogue with the Park Service just so we all can get on the same page, but any of those really would love your support.
So I've been involved with public arts, and I like a challenge. So we took on Central Park in New York City, where there were statues of men, and the female statues were a Mother Goose, Alice in Wonderland, a witch, generic witch, goddess, and we said, wait a minute, we're in the 21st century. And this park has been in there for 165 years. It's a quintessential public forum where 40 million people come to see Central Park. And so we said we want real people, real women with real histories to be shoulder to shoulder with the other monuments. So I think public art is really important. And I'm just going to close with something my mother told about Eleanor Roosevelt. There were a whole bunch of people on a boat going up the Amazon River, and they were running out of water. And somebody said, well, put your buckets down into the river. That's where the water is. So apparently you come from Kansas. So I would imagine that you can put your bucket down in Kansas and you will find water.
Don't worry too much about Seneca Falls. We have lost some industry, but we've also gained some industries. Bonnet Dental Labs is a nationwide behemoth, and they have developed business here at their headquarters and the production. Also, Waterloo Container is a huge enterprise, and they have prospered due to the development of the wine trails in Seneca County. And so there are new markets, they're just different, but Seneca Falls and the wine trail is unbelievable, the amount of people that come. And I think one of our challenges is we need to we tried it, excuse me, one time under the auspices of the Seneca Falls Economic Development Corporation, which was just an outgrowth of the Revitalization Committee, a maturation of it. We actually had a bus come and park in the downtown area, and then people could pick that bus up and it would go through the winery areas. And that way people didn't have to drive to the wineries, they could load the wine that they purchased on the bus and come home with it. So there are elements, and that is so environmentally friendly for all of us in the region. There are good things happening, I think commercially that can only bode well for the future. So don't give up hope.
Yeah, how about a book? Thank you all very much.